in the quiet of a Norfolk manor. Strange stick figures dancing men appear on walls and windows, chilling Elsie Cubitt with a terror from her past. Sherlock Holmes, the master of deduction, unravels a cryptic code tied to a Chicago criminal's obsession, racing against time to save a marriage and stop a vengeful stalker. A tale of secrets, ciphers, and relentless pursuit. Can't Holmes decode the danger before it strikes? Chapter 1. The Curious Cipher. It was a crisp autumn morning in the year 1898, when Mr. Hilton Cubitt, a gentleman of robust build and earnest demeanor, crossed the threshold of 2-1B Baker Street. The air in London was thick with the scent of coal, smoke, and the distant clatter of hansoms, but within the walls of our modest consulting room, a quiet attention prevailed. Sherlock Holmes sat by the fire, his long fingers steepled, his sharp eyes fixed upon the visitor who now stood before us, clutching a crumpled piece of paper as though it were both a talisman and a curse. I, John Watson, had taken my usual place at the writing desk, pen in hand, ready to chronicle what promised to be another of Holmes's singular adventures. Mr. Cubitt was a man of the countryside, his broad shoulders and weathered hands speaking of a life spent more in fields than in drawing rooms. His face, though handsome in a rugged way, bore the lines of recent worry, and his blue eyes flickered with a mixture of resolve and unease. He was dressed in a tweed suit, serviceable but slightly out of place amidst the urban bustle, and his heavy boots left faint traces of Norfolk clay upon our rug. Holmes, ever observant, noted these details with a glance before gesturing to the armchair opposite. "Pray, take a seat, Mr. Cubitt," said Holmes in his calm, precise tones. "You have travelled far, I perceive, and the matter that brings you here is one of no small concern. Be so good as to lay the facts before us, and omit nothing, however trivial it may seem." Cubitt settled into the chair, his large hands resting uneasily on his knees. "Mr. Holmes," he began, his voice steady but tinged with a Norfolk burr, "I am a plain man, not given to fancies or mysteries. I live at Ridingthorpe Manor, a modest estate in Norfolk, and until these past weeks, my life has been one of quiet contentment. I am married to a lady of American birth, Elsie, a woman of such grace and spirit that I count myself the luckiest of men. But now, sir, something has come between us, something I cannot fathom, and it is for this reason I seek your aid." Holmes leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Go on, Mr. Cubitt. What is the nature of this trouble?" Cubitt hesitated, as though the act of speaking might lend reality to his fears. Then, with a resolute nod, he drew the crumpled paper from his pocket and placed it on the table. "It is this, Mr. Holmes," he said. "A childish thing, you might think, yet it has brought such distress to my wife that I can no longer dismiss it as a trifle." I leaned closer to examine the paper, which was rough and stained, as though it had been handled often. Upon it was drawn a series of curious figures, small, stick-like representations of men, each in a different posture, as though caught in the midst of a dance. Some had arms raised, others bent at the knee. One figure stood with its head tilted to the side, another with both arms akimbo. They were drawn in chalk, the lines uneven but deliberate, and their arrangement suggested a sequence, though its meaning was utterly obscure. Holmes took the paper and held it to the light, his keen eyes tracing every stroke. "A cipher," he murmured, almost to himself. "A code, perhaps, but one of an unusual sort. Tell me, Mr. Cubitt, under what circumstances did this come into your possession?" Cubitt shifted in his chair, his hands clenching briefly before he spoke. It was 3 weeks ago, Mr. Holmes, that I first noticed such a drawing. It was scrawled on the wall of our garden shed, in white chalk, much like this one. I thought little of it, at first some village lad's prank, perhaps, but when I showed it to Elsie, she turned pale as death and begged me to erase it at once. She would say nothing more, only that it was a foolish thing and not to be dwelt upon. I did as she asked, but her manner troubled me. Elsie is not a woman, given to hysterics, and I could see she was deeply shaken. Holmes's eyes narrowed, and this was not an isolated incident. No, sir, Cubitt replied. Since then, these drawings have appeared again on the gatepost, on a windowsill, and once, most disturbingly, on a slip of paper pushed under our door. Each time, Elsie's distress grows, though she will not speak of it. I have pressed her, Mr. Holmes, as gently as I can, but she only shakes her head and says it is a matter from her past, something she thought buried. I cannot bear to see her so, and I have come to you in the hope that you might unravel this mystery. Holmes laid the paper on the table and leaned back, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. Describe these drawings, Mr. Cubitt. Are they always the same figures, or do they vary? They vary, sir, said Cubitt. The postures change, and the number of figures differs. Sometimes there are 5, sometimes 10 or more, but they are always these stick men, drawn in chalk, and always in a line, as though they form a message. I have copied each one I found, thinking they might be of use. He produced a small notebook from his coat and handed it to Holmes. Here are my sketches, as accurate as I could make them. Holmes opened the notebook and studied the pages, his brow furrowed in concentration. The sketches were meticulous, each figure carefully reproduced, with notes on where and when they had been found. Admirable, he said at length. You have done well to preserve these, Mr. Cubitt. They may hold the key to the matter. Now, tell me of your wife's behavior since these drawings began. Has she received any letters, or has there been any unusual activity about your estate? Cubitt shook his head. No letters that I know of, Mr. Holmes. As for activity, the manor is quiet, save for the usual comings and goings of servants and tenants. But I have noticed Elsie's habits changing. She spends hours at the window, watching the grounds, and at night she is restless, starting at every sound. I have tried to comfort her, but she withdraws, as though guarding a secret she cannot share. Holmes's gaze was distant, his mind already turning over the possibilities. Mrs. Cubitt is American, you say. From which part, and how did you come to meet her? She hails from Chicago, Cubitt replied, a note of warmth entering his voice. I met her 3 years ago, when I traveled to America on business. I deal in land and livestock, Mr. Holmes, and I had gone to negotiate a purchase of cattle. Elsie was staying at the same hotel, and we struck up a conversation. She was charming, spirited, with a quick mind and a kind heart. We were married within the year, and she came with me to Norfolk. Until now, I have never had cause to question her happiness. And her past? Holmes pressed. What do you know of her life before you met? Cubitt frowned, his honest face clouded. Little enough, I confess. She spoke of her family only in general terms. Her father was a merchant, she said, and she had no close kin. I sensed there was pain in her history, but I did not pry. I loved her, Mr. Holmes, and I trusted her. I still do, but these drawings have set a shadow between us. Holmes nodded, his expression inscrutable. One final question, Mr. Cubitt. Have you observed any strangers about your estate, or has anyone inquired after your wife? Cubit hesitated, then nodded. There was one thing, though it may be nothing. A week ago, a man came to the village, asking questions at the inn. He was tall, lean, with a sharp face and an American accent. He claimed to be a traveler, but he asked about Riding Thorpe Manor and whether a lady from Chicago lived there. The innkeeper thought him odd and sent him on his way, but I only heard of it yesterday. Holmes's eyes gleamed with sudden intensity. An American, you say? Did the innkeeper describe his manner or dress? He wore a dark coat and carried a small valise, said Cubit. His manner was guarded, and he left when pressed for his business. I thought it strange, but with the drawings on my mind, I did not pursue it. You have done well to mention it, said Holmes. Now, Mr. Cubit, I shall retain this paper and your notebook. Return to Norfolk and keep a sharp watch. Note every new drawing, its location, and the time it appears. Above all, observe your wife's reactions, but do not press her further for now. This is no mere prank, but a matter that may carry grave consequences. I shall telegraph if I require more information. Cubit rose, his relief tempered by lingering anxiety. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I trust you will find the meaning of these figures. I only wish to see Elsie at peace again. When our visitor had departed, Holmes sat in silence, the paper with the dancing figures before him. I watched as he traced the lines with a pencil, his lips pursed in thought. What do you make of it, Holmes? I ventured at last. Is it, indeed, a cipher, or merely some childish scribble? It is a cipher, Watson, he replied, his voice low and certain. A code, and a clever one, designed to convey a message to one who understands it. The figures are not random. Their postures are too varied, too deliberate. I suspect they represent letters, perhaps an entire alphabet, but without a key, they are as mute as hieroglyphs before Champollion. He rose and crossed to his bookshelf, pulling down a volume on cryptography. The fear in Mrs. Cubit's eyes suggests she knows the code's meaning, yet she will not speak. That points to a secret, Watson's secret tied to her American past. This man at the inn, with his sharp face and guarded manner, is no coincidence. He is part of the pattern, though whether as author or messenger remains to be seen. Holmes spent the rest of the morning poring over the figures, sketching and comparing them with known ciphers. I, meanwhile, busied myself with my practice, though my thoughts strayed often to the strange drawings and the shadow they cast over the Cubit's marriage. By afternoon, Holmes had made little progress, but his mood was one of quiet determination. This is no simple substitution cipher, he remarked as we took tea. The figures' postures suggest a visual alphabet, perhaps unique to a specific group. I have seen nothing like it in my records, but I shall not be deterred. The key lies in Norfolk, Watson, and in Mrs. Cubit's silence. We must wait for further developments, but I have no doubt they will come. The days that followed were filled with the usual routine of our life at Baker Street, yet the mystery of the dancing men lingered in my mind. Holmes, for his part, seemed almost to relish the challenge, his restless intellect seizing upon the puzzle with a tenacity that I knew would not falter. He corresponded with Cubit, urging him to report any new drawings, and began inquiries into American criminal societies, suspecting a connection to Elsie's past. It was on the 5th day that a telegram arrived from Norfolk, its contents brief but urgent. Cubit reported a new sequence of figures, this time on the sundial in his garden, and Elsie's reaction had been one of near collapse. Holmes read the message, his face hardening. "Come, Watson," he said, reaching for his hat. "The game is afoot. We must to Norfolk at once, for I fear this cipher is but the prelude to a darker drama." And so, with the dancing figures fixed in my mind, I followed Holmes into the gathering storm, little knowing the peril that awaited us in the quiet lanes of Norfolk. The adventure had begun, and its threads, like the figures themselves, were poised to unravel in ways we could not yet foresee. Chapter 2. The Norfolk Vigil. The journey to Norfolk was a study in contrasts. The clamour of London's streets giving way to the serene expanse of the countryside. The train rattled through fields of golden stubble and hedgerows touched with the first blush of autumn, while within our compartment, Sherlock Holmes sat in silent contemplation, his sharp features illuminated by the flickering light of the carriage lamp. His long fingers toyed with the notebook provided by Hilton Cubitt, its pages filled with sketches of the curious stick figures that had so unsettled the household at Ridingthorpe Manor. I, for my part, gazed out at the passing landscape, my mind turning over the strange cipher and the shadow it cast upon our client's marriage. We arrived at Norwich Station in the late afternoon, where Cubitt awaited us, his sturdy frame unmistakable amidst the crowd. His face, though still bearing the honest simplicity I had noted in London, was now etched with deeper lines of worry. He greeted us with a firm handshake, but his eyes betrayed a restless unease. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice low, "I cannot thank you enough for coming. The matter has grown worse since my telegram. Elsie is near breaking, and I fear for her health." Holmes's gaze was keen, taking in every detail of Cubitt's demeanour. "Tell me everything," he said as we climbed into a waiting dog-cart. "Leave out no particular, however small." As we jolted along the narrow lanes toward Ridingthorpe Manor, Cubitt recounted the events of the past days. The new sequence of dancing figures, scrawled on the sundial, had appeared 2 nights prior, discovered by a gardener at first light. Elsie, upon seeing them, had uttered a low cry and retreated to her room, refusing all company. Cubitt had copied the figures with care, as Holmes had instructed, and sent them by post. But the act of doing so seemed only to deepen his wife's distress. "She begged me to burn the paper," he said, his voice thick with frustration, "but I could not, knowing you needed it. She will not speak of what these drawings mean, Mr. Holmes, and it is tearing her apart." Holmes listened in silence, his eyes fixed on the horizon, where the low hills of Norfolk rolled gently under a sky heavy with clouds, and the estate itself. He asked at length, "Have there been any further signs of strangers?" Cubitt nodded gravely. "Last night, I thought I saw a figure moving near the orchard, a tall man, cloaked in shadow. I gave chase, but he was gone before I could reach him. The ground was soft, and I found footprints leading to the marsh, but nothing more. I begin to think I am chasing ghosts, Mr. Holmes." "No ghost, Mr. Cubitt," said Holmes sharply. "A man with a purpose, and one who knows the ground well enough to evade you. We shall see what traces he has left." Ridingthorpe Manor came into view as we rounded a bend, a handsome Georgian house of red brick, its windows glowing warmly against the gathering dusk. The grounds were well kept, with neat lawns and a gravel drive bordered by yew hedges, yet there was an air of disquiet about the place, as though the very stones sensed the intrusion of the strange cipher. Cubitt led us inside, where a fire crackled in the hall, and introduced us to his housekeeper, Mrs. Hargrove, a stout woman with a kind but anxious face. "Mrs. Cubitt is resting," she said, her hands twisting in her apron. She's not been herself, sir. Not since those queer drawings began. I've tried to comfort her, but she have none of it. Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. I shall need to see the sundial and any other places where the figures have appeared. Mr. Cubitt, you will show me the grounds. Watson, remain here and keep an eye on the house. Note any movement, however slight. I took my post by a window overlooking the garden, my revolver in my pocket, while Holmes and Cubitt disappeared into the twilight. The manor was quiet, save for the occasional creak of settling timbers and the distant bark of a dog. I could not shake the feeling that we were being watched, though the grounds appeared empty. My thoughts turned to Elsie Cubitt, alone in her room, haunted by a past she dared not reveal. What secret could inspire such fear, and what did these dancing figures portend? Holmes returned an hour later, his boots muddy and his eyes alight with purpose. The sundial bears fresh chalk marks, he said, producing a sketch of the latest sequence. The figures are consistent with those you sent, Mr. Cubitt, but their arrangement is more complex. I have also found traces of a man's boots near the orchard, deep impressions, suggesting a tall, lean figure, just as you described. He is no phantom, but a flesh and blood intruder. Cubitt's face darkened. What does he want, Mr. Holmes? Why torment my wife with these scribbles? That, said Holmes, is what we must discover. The figures are a cipher, I am certain, and their message is meant for Mrs. Cubitt. Her fear suggests she understands their meaning, though she will not share it. We must proceed with care, for this man is bold, and his purpose is not yet clear. That evening we dined in the manor's oak-panelled dining room, though the meal was a sombre affair. Elsie Cubitt joined us briefly, her beauty striking despite her pallor and the dark circles beneath her eyes. She was a woman of middle height, with auburn hair and a quiet grace that spoke of both strength and vulnerability. She spoke little, her gaze darting to the windows, and excused herself before the dessert was served. Cubitt watched her go, his expression one of helpless concern. After dinner, Holmes drew me aside. Watson, he said, his voice low, this is no ordinary case. The cipher is a code, likely a substitution alphabet, but its origin is obscure. I suspect it is tied to Mrs. Cubitt's American past, perhaps to a criminal element she fled. The man in the shadows is no mere prowler. He is delivering a message, and its tone is one of menace. What do you propose? I asked. We shall keep a vigil tonight, he replied. Cubitt will watch the front of the house, you the rear, and I shall patrol the grounds. If our visitor returns, we must catch him in the act. But we must also tread lightly, for Mrs. Cubitt's silence suggests a danger we do not yet fully grasp. The night was cold and still, the moon obscured by clouds. I took my position by the kitchen door, my senses alert to every sound, rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a night bird. Hours passed, and my eyes grew heavy, but I forced myself to remain vigilant. It was near midnight when a faint light caught my attention, flickering briefly near the garden wall. I gripped my revolver and moved silently toward it, my heart pounding. The light vanished as quickly as it had appeared, and I found no trace of its source. Disappointed, I returned to my post, only to be met by Holmes, his face grim. You saw it too, Watson, he said. A lantern, carried by a man who knows how to move unseen. He left no new figures tonight, but I found this. He held up a small piece of chalk, its tip worn from use. Our friend is growing careless. Cubitt joined us, his face flushed with frustration. Nothing at the front, he reported. But I heard footsteps. I'm sure of it. This cannot go on, Mr. Holmes. Elsie is wasting away, and I am powerless to help her. Holmes placed a hand on Cubit's shoulder. Courage, Mr. Cubit. We are closing in. Tomorrow I shall examine the new figures more closely and send a cable to London for information on American ciphers. In the meantime, keep your wife close and your doors locked. This man will return, and when he does, we shall be ready. As we retired for the night, I could not shake the image of those dancing figures, their crude forms seeming to mock us with their hidden meaning. Holmes, however, was undeterred, his mind already racing toward the solution. I fell asleep to the sound of his violin, its mournful notes weaving through the darkness, a prelude to the drama that awaited us in the days to come. Chapter 3. The shadow of the past. The dawn broke over Riding Thorpe Manor with a chill mist that clung to the Norfolk fields, shrouding the estate in a veil of secrecy that seemed to mirror the mystery we pursued. Sherlock Holmes was already awake when I descended to the breakfast room, his lean figure bent over Hilton Cubit's notebook. The pages of dancing figures spread before him like a map to an uncharted realm. His eyes, sharp and restless, betrayed the workings of a mind wholly absorbed, and I knew better than to interrupt his silent calculations. Instead, I took my place at the table, where Cubit joined us, his face haggard from a sleepless night. "Any news, Mr. Holmes?" he asked, his voice heavy with hope and dread. Holmes looked up, his expression one of measured resolve. "The cipher begins to yield its secrets, Mr. Cubit, but slowly. The figures are indeed a code, each posture representing a letter, though the full alphabet eludes me. The message on the sundial, however, suggests urgency, summons perhaps, or a warning. I must see your wife this morning. Her knowledge, however guarded, is the key to this puzzle." Cubit's jaw tightened. "She is fragile, Mr. Holmes. I fear pressing her may do more harm than good." "I understand your concern," Holmes replied, his tone firm but not unkind. "Yet her silence endangers you both. I shall be gentle, but we cannot proceed blindly." After breakfast, Cubit led us to the drawing room, where Elsie Cubit sat by a window, her auburn hair catching the pale light. She was a striking figure, her features delicate yet marked by a quiet strength, though her eyes held a haunted look that spoke of sleepless nights and unspoken fears. She rose as we entered, her hands clasped tightly before her, and greeted us with a nod. "Mrs. Cubit," Holmes began, his voice soft but direct, "I am here to help you and your husband. These dancing figures that so distress you are no mere prank. They are a message, and I believe you know their meaning. Will you not trust us with the truth?" Elsie's lips trembled, and for a moment I thought she might speak, but she shook her head, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I cannot, Mr. Holmes," she whispered. "It is a matter long buried, and to speak of it would bring only pain. I beg you, let it be." Holmes studied her, his gaze piercing yet not without compassion. "Madam, the man who leaves these messages is no phantom. He was seen last night, near the garden, with a lantern and chalk. He seeks you, and his purpose is not benign. If you will not speak for your own sake, consider your husband, who suffers with you." Cubit stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Elsie, my dear, whatever it is, we can face it together. I cannot bear to see you thus." Tears welled in Elsie's eyes, but she remained silent, her hands twisting in her lap. At last, she rose and excused herself, leaving us with the weight of her unspoken past. Cubit's shoulders sagged, and he turned to Holmes with a look of despair. "I have failed." "Her, Mr. Holmes," he said. "I thought my love enough to shield her, but this shadow from her past is too strong." "You have not failed," Holmes replied sharply, "but we must act swiftly. The man who prowls your grounds is bold, and his messages grow more frequent. Watson, come with me. We shall examine the estate once more, for daylight may reveal what darkness conceals." We spent the morning scouring the grounds, Holmes moving with the precision of a bloodhound. Near the orchard, he found fresh footprints deep, narrow impressions of a man's boots, leading toward the marsh. He knelt, examining the earth with a lens, and pointed to a faint mark where a stick had been used for support. "Our visitor is cautious," he murmured, "but not infallible. These tracks match those from last night, and they suggest a man of considerable height, lean but strong." Further on, hidden among the yew hedges, Holmes discovered a scrap of paper, half buried in the soil. It bore a single dancing figure, its arms raised in a gesture that seemed almost defiant. Holmes pocketed it, his eyes gleaming. "A careless mistake," he said. "This man is growing desperate, and desperation breeds error." Back at the manor, Holmes retreated to the library, where he spread out the sketches and began charting the figures. His method was meticulous, grouping similar postures and testing combinations that might form words. "The key lies in frequency," he explained, his pencil flying over the page. "In English, certain letters E, T, appear often. If these figures represent an alphabet, the most common postures should correspond to these letters." By midday, he had made progress, identifying a sequence that, with some conjecture, spelled come. The word, stark and imperative, sent a chill through me. "A summons," I said. "But to whom, and for what purpose?" "To Mrs. Cubit," Holmes replied, his voice low. "And the purpose is tied to her past. Her fear, her silence, her refusal to confide even in her husband, all point to a history she has fled. I suspect this man is no stranger to her, Watson. He is someone she knows, someone she dreads." Holmes dispatched a telegram to a contact at the American Embassy, requesting information on Chicago criminal societies known for coded communications. "Mrs. Cubit's origins lie in Chicago," he said. "If my suspicions are correct, this cipher may be linked to a gang or individual from her former life. We must learn what she left behind." As evening approached, Cubit reported a troubling development. Elsie had taken to wandering the grounds alone, her eyes fixed on the distant marshes. "She thinks I do not see her," he said, his voice heavy with worry. "But I fear she is searching for something or someone." Holmes's expression darkened. "She may be drawn to confront this shadow herself. We cannot allow it. Tonight we shall maintain our vigil, but with greater care. Mr. Cubit, you will stay near your wife. Watson and I will watch the grounds. If this man returns, we must be ready." The night was moonless, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth. I took my post near the garden wall, my revolver at hand, while Holmes prowled the perimeter, his figure a shadow among shadows. The hours crept by, marked only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of a nightjar. My thoughts turned to Elsie Cubit, her silent suffering a stark contrast to the quiet beauty of the Norfolk night. What had she fled in America, and why did it pursue her now? Near 2 o'clock, a faint sound broke the silence, a soft crunch of gravel, followed by the flicker of a light near the sundial. I tensed, my hand on my revolver, but before I could move, Holmes was at my side, his finger to his lips. "Wait," he whispered. "Let him act." The light paused, and I saw a tall figure, cloaked in darkness, bending over the sundial. The scratch of chalk was audible, deliberate, as though the act itself were a ritual. Holmes moved swiftly, his footsteps silent on the grass, but the man was alert. He dropped the chalk and fled, his lantern extinguished as he vanished into the marsh. Holmes gave chase, but the darkness swallowed their forms, and I was left alone. The night closing in around me, Holmes returned minutes later, his face set with frustration. "He is swift," he said, "and knows the terrain. But he left this." He held up a fresh sketch, the dancing figures bold against the sundial's stone. "We are closing in, Watson. This man is no mere messenger. He is the author of the cipher, and his purpose is tied to Mrs. Cubitt's fear." As we returned to the manor, the weight of the mystery pressed upon us. The dancing figures, once a curiosity, now loomed as harbingers of a past that refused to stay buried. Holmes's mind was a furnace, burning through the clues, but I sensed that the heart of this enigma lay not in the cipher alone, but in the woman who bore its secret in silence. Chapter 4. The key unlocked the morning light filtered through the heavy curtains of Ridingthorpe Manor, casting a pale glow across the library where Sherlock Holmes sat, his lean frame bent over a table strewn with papers. The sketches of the dancing figures, meticulously copied by Hilton Cubitt, lay before him, their cryptic forms a silent challenge to his relentless intellect. I had seldom seen Holmes so absorbed, his eyes darting from one sequence to another, his pencil scribbling notes in a frenzy of deduction. The air was thick with the scent of old books and the faint tang of ink, and outside, the Norfolk landscape lay quiet under a sky of unbroken grey. I had risen early, unable to sleep after the previous night's pursuit, and found Holmes already at work, his breakfast untouched. "You have made progress, Holmes," I ventured, taking a seat opposite him. He glanced up, his sharp features alight with a fire I knew well. "Progress, Watson, but not triumph, not yet. The cipher is yielding, but it is a stubborn beast. These figures are indeed a substitution. Alphabet, each posture representing a letter. The challenge lies in mapping them, for the code is unique, devised by one with a singular mind." He pushed a sheet toward me, marked with his neat hand. The latest sequence, taken from the sundial, was annotated with tentative letters beneath each figure. "The word 'come' emerged from the previous message," he said. "This new sequence is longer, more complex, but I have identified recurring figures here, the man with arms raised, and here, the one with a bent knee. These likely correspond to common letters, E or T. With trial and error, I have begun to construct the alphabet." I studied the paper, marveling at the precision of his method. The figures, once mere childish scribbles, now took on a sinister clarity. "And what does this message say?" I asked. Holmes's lips tightened. "It is incomplete, but the fragments suggest a command. Come soon. The tone is imperative. Watson, and it is directed at Mrs. Cubitt. Her fear confirms she understands its meaning, though she guards her secret with a tenacity that complicates our task." Hilton Cubitt joined us, his face drawn from another sleepless night, his eyes, heavy with worry, fixed on Holmes. "Have you found anything, Mr. Holmes?" "Elsie is worse. This morning she barely speaks, and I found her staring at the sundial as though it were a spectre." Holmes folded his hands, his gaze steady. "Mr. Cubitt, the figures are a cipher, a coded message meant for your wife. The latest, from the sundial, urges her to come soon. I suspect the sender is someone from her past, someone she fled in America. You mentioned a man at the village inn, an American with a sharp face. Has there been any further sign of him? Cubitt shook his head. None, though I've asked the servants to watch for strangers. The village is quiet, but I cannot shake the feeling that we are being watched. Holmes nodded, his mind already racing ahead. We must act on two fronts. First, I shall continue to decode the cipher, for each message brings us closer to the sender's intent. Second, we must learn more of your wife's history. Her silence is a barrier, but there are other avenues. I have wired the American Embassy for information on Chicago criminal societies, particularly those known for cryptic communications. The man we seek may be tied to such a group. Cubitt's expression hardened. You think Elsie was involved with criminals? Not necessarily, Holmes replied, his tone measured. But her fear suggests a connection, however unwilling. A woman does not flee across an ocean without cause, nor does a man pursue her with such persistence unless the stakes are high. We must tread carefully, for this is no ordinary adversary. Holmes spent the morning in the library, his focus unbroken as he tested combinations of letters against the dancing figures. I assisted where I could, copying his charts and fetching volumes from the Manor's modest collection, though none shed light on the cipher's origins. By noon, Holmes had deciphered another fragment, or else the words, stark and threatening, hung in the air like a storm cloud. This is no mere summons, Holmes said, his voice low. It is a threat, Watson. The sender grows impatient, and I fear what may follow if Mrs. Cubitt does not comply. I felt a chill, despite the fire crackling in the grate. What can we do, Holmes? If she will not speak, how can we protect her? We protect her by understanding the enemy, he replied. The cipher has nearly cracked another message or two, and I shall have the full alphabet. But we must also find this man. His footprints, his chalk, his lantern all point to a physical presence, not a phantom. He is near, Watson, and he will return. Cubitt, who had been pacing the room, stopped abruptly. I cannot sit idle while my wife suffers. Let me search the marshes, Mr. Holmes. I know the paths. If he's hiding there, I'll find him. Holmes shook his head. Your courage does you credit, Mr. Cubitt, but you must remain here. Your wife needs you, and a reckless pursuit may drive our quarry to ground. Leave the hunt to me. Watson and I will scour the estate this afternoon, while you keep watch over the house. Note any new figures, and do not let Mrs. Cubitt wander alone. Reluctantly, Cubitt agreed, and Holmes and I set out to explore the grounds. The mist had lifted, revealing a landscape of rolling fields and tangled marshes, the air sharp with the scent of damp earth and heather. Holmes moved with purpose, his eyes scanning every inch of the terrain. Near the orchard, he paused, kneeling, to examine a patch of soft ground. Fresh tracks, he said, pointing to a set of boot prints, deeper than before. He was here this morning, Watson, after last night's escape. He is growing bolder. We followed the tracks to the edge of the marsh, where they vanished into a maze of reeds and shallow pools. Holmes's expression was grim. This man knows the land as well as Cubitt himself. He is no stranger to Norfolk, or he has studied it well. We must be vigilant tonight, for I suspect he will strike again. Returning to the manor, we found Cubitt in the hall, his face pale. Another drawing, he said, leading us to the stables. On the wooden door, a new sequence of figures was scrawled in bold chalk, the lines sharp and hurried. Holmes copied them swiftly, his eyes narrowing as he worked. "This is shorter," he murmured. "A warning, perhaps, or a deadline." Back in the library, Holmes added the new sequence to his charts, his pencil moving with a speed that betrayed his growing certainty. Hours passed, the silence broken only by the scratch of his pen and the occasional crackle of the fire. At last, he leaned back, a gleam of triumph in his eyes. "I have it, Watson," he said. "The cipher is cracked. This message reads, 'Tonight or never.'" I stared at the paper, the figures now transformed into a chilling ultimatum. "Tonight," I said. "Holmes, what does it mean?" "It means our adversary is desperate," he replied. "He demands Mrs. Cubitt's compliance, and he will act tonight if she does not yield. We must prepare a trap, Watson. But first, I must speak to Mrs. Cubitt again. Her secret can no longer be kept." We found Elsie in the drawing room, her face ashen as she stared at the new drawing which Cubitt had shown her. Holmes approached her with a gentleness I rarely saw in him. "Mrs. Cubitt," he said, "the message on the stable door reads, 'Tonight or never.' The man who writes these figures is here, in Norfolk, and he seeks you. I have broken his code, but I need your truth to end this. Who is he, and what does he want?" Elsie's hands trembled, and for a moment I thought she would faint. But she drew a shuddering breath and met Holmes's gaze. "His name is Abe Slaney," she said, her voice barely audible. "He was my fiancé in Chicago, a man I loved until I learned his true nature. He is a criminal, Mr. Holmes, a leader of a gang who used these dancing figures as their secret code. I fled to England to escape him, but he has found me. He wants me back, or he will destroy everything I hold dear." Holmes's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "Thank you, Mrs. Cubitt. Your courage has given us the key. Tonight, we shall meet Mr. Slaney on our terms. Mr. Cubitt, you will stay with your wife. Watson and I will ensure this man's reign of terror ends." As dusk fell, Holmes outlined his plan a trap to catch Slaney in the act, using the cipher to lure him to the manor. The dancing figures, once a mystery, were now our weapon. And I felt a surge of hope that we might yet save Elsie Cubitt from the shadow of her past. Chapter 5. The Journey North. The urgency of Elsie Cubitt's revelation hung over us like a storm cloud as Sherlock Holmes and I prepared to depart for Norfolk. The morning was raw and damp, the London air heavy with the promise of rain and Baker. Streets seemed to pulse with the restless energy of a city unaware of the drama unfolding beyond its bounds. Holmes, his mind a crucible of calculation, moved with a briskness that belied the gravity of our mission. His lean figure was already cloaked in his travelling ulster, his keen eyes scanning the papers strewn across our sitting room. Hilton Cubitt's sketches of the dancing figures, now partially decoded, and his own charts mapping their cryptic alphabet. "Pack lightly, Watson," he said, his voice sharp with purpose. "We take the 10 o'clock train to Norwich. Time is our adversary now, for if Mrs. Cubitt speaks true, this Abe Slaney is a man of action, and his latest message, 'Tonight or never,' suggests a climax is at hand." I nodded, gathering my essentials: a revolver, a notebook, and a change of clothes, while Holmes folded the sketches into his pocketbook. "Do you believe her, Holmes?" I asked, struck by the weight of Elsie's confession, that this Slaney, a criminal from Chicago, has pursued her across the Atlantic for love or vengeance. Holmes's lips curved in a faint, mirthless smile. Love and vengeance are often twinned, Watson. Mrs. Cubit's fear is genuine, and her story aligns with the cipher's purpose. These dancing figures are no mere whimsy. They are the private language of a criminal fraternity, and Slaney wields them as a weapon to compel her return. Whether his motive is passion or retribution, he is dangerous, and we must reach Norfolk before he acts. We arrived at Liverpool Street Station with minutes to spare, the platform a chaos of steam and shouting porters. Holmes, ever aloof amidst the throng, secured our tickets and led the way to a first-class compartment. As the train pulled away, the city's grey sprawl gave way to the patchwork fields of Essex, and I watched the landscape shift, my thoughts turning to the quiet manor where a woman's past threatened to unravel her present. Holmes sat opposite, his eyes fixed on the horizon, though I knew his mind was elsewhere, piecing together the puzzle of the dancing men. He drew out Cubit's notebook and spread it on the seat, his pencil tracing the figures with a precision that bordered on obsession. "The cipher is nearly complete," he murmured, "with Mrs. Cubit's confirmation that Slaney devised it. I have narrowed the remaining letters. The figure with both arms akimbo is likely N, given its frequency in tonight. The bent knee, I suspect, is R. Soon, Watson, we shall read his messages as plainly as a broadsheet." Marveled at his tenacity, though a question nagged at me. "Holmes, if Slaney is so bold as to leave these messages openly, why does he not approach Mrs. Cubit directly? Why this elaborate code?" Holmes's gaze flicked to me, his expression one of grim certainty. "Fear, Watson. The cipher is both a summons and a terror. Slaney knows Mrs. Cubit understands it, and each message tightens the noose of her dread. He seeks to break her will without revealing himself to others. It is a coward's tactic, cloaked in cunning. But his boldness betrays him. He lingers too long, leaves too many traces. We shall have him." The journey passed in near silence, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of the train and the occasional rustle of Holmes's papers. I tried to read, but my thoughts strayed to Elsie Cubit, her pale face and trembling hands, and to her husband, whose honest devotion seemed powerless against the shadow of her past. The weight of their plight pressed upon me, and I found myself gripping the handle of my revolver, as if to anchor myself against the uncertainty ahead. We reached Norwich. By mid-afternoon, the station a modest affair compared to London's grandeur. Hilton Cubit awaited us, his broad frame dwarfing the crowd, his face etched with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, clasping our hands, "you cannot know what your coming means to us. Elsie is in a..." Statius saw the new message on the stable door and nearly fainted. "I've kept her inside, but she's like a caged bird, starting at every sound." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Show me the message, Mr. Cubit, and tell me all that has occurred since your last telegram." As we rode in Cubit's dogcart toward Riding Thorpe Manor, he recounted the events of the past day. The new sequence of figures, bold and hurried, had appeared on the stable door at dawn. Elsie, venturing out despite his pleas, had seen them, and collapsed, her cries incoherent but filled with terror. Cubit had copied the figures and locked the door, fearing further intrusions. "I've set the gardener and stable boy to watch the grounds," he said, "but they've seen nothing. It's as if this man is a wraith slipping through our fingers." "No wraith, Mr. Cubit," Holmes replied, his voice steady. "A man of flesh and blood, and one who grows reckless. His messages are frequent now, a sign of desperation. We shall use this to our advantage." The manor came into view, its red brick glowing dully under the overcast sky. The grounds were as I remembered, neat lawns, yew hedges, and the ominous sundial standing like a sentinel in the garden. Holmes dismounted and strode to the stable, where the fresh chalk marks stood out starkly against the weathered wood. He studied them, his pencil moving swiftly as he translated. "This confirms it," he said at length. "The message reads, 'Meet me.' He is pressing her to act, Watson, and tonight is his deadline." Cubitt's face darkened. "Meet him. Over my dead body. I'll not let Elsie face this villain alone." Holmes placed a hand on his shoulder, his tone calm but firm. "Your devotion is admirable, Mr. Cubitt, but we must be strategic. Slaney expects compliance, not resistance. We shall give him a meeting, but on our terms. First, I must see Mrs. Cubitt." We entered the manor, where the housekeeper, Mrs. Hargrove, greeted us with a worried frown. "She's in the drawing room, sir," she said, "but she's not herself, keeps muttering about Chicago and someone named Abe. I've never seen her so." Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Mrs. Hargrove. See that we are not disturbed." Elsie Cubitt sat by the fire, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes fixed on the flames. She rose as we entered, her beauty marred by exhaustion and fear. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice trembling, "have you come to save me, or to drag my past into the light?" "Both," Madam Holmes replied, his tone gentle but resolute. "Abe Slaney is here, and his messages grow bolder. The latest demands a meeting. I know he was your fiancé criminal, you fled. But I must know more his habits, his allies, anything that might help us end this." Elsie's eyes filled with tears, but she steadied herself. "Abe was charming once, but cruel beneath it. He led a gang in Chicago, men who used the dancing figures to plan their crimes, robberies, extortion. I learned too late, and when I broke with him, he swore I'd never escape. I thought England was far enough, but he has found me. He wants me back, Mr. Holmes, or he'll ruin Hilton's life to punish me." Holmes's gaze was steady. "He shall not have you, Mrs. Cubitt. Tonight we will confront him. Will you trust us to protect you?" She nodded, her lips trembling. "I have no choice. But be careful, he is cunning, and he does not forgive." Holmes turned to Cubitt. "Stay with your wife, and keep the doors locked. Watson and I will prepare. Slaney will come tonight, and we shall be ready." As dusk settled over the manor, Holmes outlined his plan, a trap baited with a false message, crafted in the dancing figures to lure Slaney into the open. The journey north had brought us to the heart of the mystery, and now, with the cipher unlocked and Elsie's truth revealed, we stood on the precipice of a confrontation that would test our nerve and resolve. Chapter 6. The Night Visitor. The twilight deepened over Riding Thorpe Manor, casting long shadows across the Norfolk grounds, where the air was heavy with the scent of damp grass and the distant temps of the marsh. Within the manor, a tense hush prevailed, broken only by the soft creak of floorboards and the occasional crackle of the fire in the library. Sherlock Holmes, his lean frame taut with anticipation, stood by the window, his sharp eyes scanning the darkened garden. The dancing figures, now decoded as a sinister summons from Abe Slaney, had brought us to this moment, a vigil poised on the edge of confrontation. I, John Watson, stood ready with my revolver, my nerves strung tight as I awaited the night's reckoning. Hilton Cubitt, his broad shoulders squared with resolve, joined us in the library after ensuring Elsie was secure in her room. Guarded by the steadfast Mrs. Hargrove, his face, etched with the strain of the past weeks, held a fierce determination. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice low but steady, "I'll not let this scoundrel torment my wife further. If he comes tonight, I want to face him." Holmes turned from the window, his expression one of calculated calm. "Your courage is commendable, Mr. Cubitt, but we must proceed with precision. Slaney is cunning, and his use of the cipher suggests a mind accustomed to evasion. We shall set a watch 3 points to cover the approaches to the manor. You will take the front near the drive, where the gravel will betray any footfall. Watson, you will guard the rear by the kitchen door, with a clear view of the garden. I shall patrol the perimeter, focusing on the sundial and orchard, where our visitor has struck before. If he appears, do not engage a lone signal with a low whistle, and we shall converge." Cubitt nodded, his jaw set. "And if he shows himself?" "What then?" "Restrain him, if possible," Holmes replied, "but do not underestimate him. He is desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. My goal is to take him alive, for he must answer for his actions." As night fell, the manor seemed to hold its breath. The sky was moonless, cloaked in clouds that smothered the stars, and a faint mist curled through the grounds, lending an eerie stillness to the scene. I took my post by the kitchen door, my revolver in hand, my senses sharpened by the weight of our task. The garden stretched before me, its outlines blurred in the darkness, the sundial a pale ghost at its center. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, set my heart racing, but I forced myself to remain steady, trusting in Holmes's plan. Holmes, meanwhile, moved like a spectre through the grounds, his dark figure blending with the shadows. Cubitt, stationed by the front drive, was a silent sentinel, his lantern dimmed to avoid detection. The hours crept by, the silence broken only by the distant call of a nightjar and the soft drip of moisture from the eaves. My thoughts turned to Elsie. Cubitt, locked in her room, her past a chain that bound her to this unseen menace. The dancing figures, once a childish puzzle, now loomed as harbingers of a threat we could no longer ignore. It was near midnight when a faint light flickered in the garden, a pinprick of yellow that danced briefly near the sundial before vanishing. I gripped my revolver, my pulse quickening, and strained my eyes into the darkness. The light reappeared, closer now, moving stealthily along the garden wall. I crept forward, keeping low, and saw a tall figure, cloaked in a long coat, bending over the wall with a piece of chalk in hand. The scratch of the chalk was faint but unmistakable, a deliberate act that sent a chill through me. I prepared to whistle, but Holmes was already there, his form materializing from the shadows with a swiftness that startled me. "Hold, Watson," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Let him finish." The figure worked quickly, sketching a new sequence of dancing men, their forms bold against the stone. The lantern, half shuttered, cast a feeble glow, revealing a lean, sharp-featured face, undoubtedly Abe Slaney, the man Elsie feared. His movements were precise, almost ritualistic, as though the act of drawing were a compulsion. Holmes waited, his body tense, until Slaney stepped back, satisfied with his work. "Now," Holmes hissed, and sprang forward, his long arms reaching for the intruder. Slaney, alerted by some instinct, spun around, his lantern clattering to the ground. He was swift, his lean frame dodging Holmes's grasp, and he bolted toward the orchard, his coat flapping like a raven's wings. I joined the chase, my boots sinking into the soft earth, while Cubitt, hearing the commotion, ran from the front, his lantern swinging wildly. The pursuit was frantic, the darkness a maze of shapes and shadows. Slaney's knowledge of the terrain gave him an edge, his figure weaving through the trees with uncanny agility. Holmes, undeterred, followed with a doggedness that bordered on ferocity, his long strides closing the gap. I struggled to keep pace, my breath ragged, while Cubit's shouts echoed behind us, urging us on. We reached the edge of the marsh, where the ground grew treacherous, the reeds thick and the air heavy with damp. Slaney's footsteps faltered, and Holmes seized the moment, tackling him to the ground. A brief struggle ensued, Slaney's wiry strength surprising for a man so lean, but Holmes's grip was iron. I reached them, my revolver trained, as Cubit arrived, his face flushed with fury. "Hold him," Holmes commanded, pinning Slaney's arms. The man glared up at us, his sharp features twisted with defiance, his breath coming in harsh gasps. "You've no right," he snarled, his voice thick with an American drawl. "This is between me and Elsie. She is Mrs. Cubit now," Holmes retorted, his tone cold. "And your messages end tonight." We bound Slaney's wrists with a length of cord from Cubit's pocket and marched him back to the manor, his lantern retrieved and his chalk confiscated. The new message on the garden wall, illuminated by Cubit's light, read "Last chance." In Holmes's decoded alphabeta, final plea or threat, now rendered impotent by our capture. In the library, Slaney sat sullenly, his sharp eyes darting between us. Holmes stood before him, his presence commanding. "Abe Slaney," he said, "your cipher is broken, your movements tracked. You will answer for your actions, but first, you will tell us why you have pursued Mrs. Cubit across an ocean." Slaney's lips curled in a bitter smile. "She was mine first," he said. "Elsie promised herself to me, then ran when she learned who I was. I've spent years tracking her, and I'd have had her back, one way or another." Cubit's fists clenched, but Holmes raised a hand, his gaze unwavering. "Your motives are clear, but your methods betray you. The dancing figures were clever, but not clever enough. You will face justice, Slaney, and Mrs. Cubit will be free of you." As we handed Slaney to the local constable, summoned by Cubit's stable boy, the weight of the night's events settled over us. The dancing figures, once a torment, were now silent, their maker bound and their message exposed. Yet I sensed that for Elsie Cubit, the shadow of her past would linger, a reminder of the cost of secrets and the power of truth. Holmes, ever pragmatic, turned to Cubit. "Your wife is safe, Mr. Cubit, but she will need your strength in the days ahead. The cipher is broken, but her heart must heal." As dawn broke, painting the Norfolk sky with streaks of gold, I felt a weary satisfaction. The night visitor had been unmasked, but the full tale of his pursuit and Elsie's escape remained to be told, a story that would unfold in the quiet of the manor, under the watchful eye of Sherlock Holmes. Chapter 7. The American Connection. The first light of dawn crept over the Norfolk horizon, painting the grounds of Riding Thorpe Manor with a soft, golden hue that seemed to mock the tension of the night just past, within the manor's library. Where the fire had dwindled to embers, Sherlock Holmes stood with an air of quiet triumph, his sharp eyes fixed on the bound figure of Abe Slaney. The man, lean and sharp-featured, sat in a her-backed chair, his wrists secured with cord, his defiant gaze flickering between Holmes, Hilton Cubit, and myself. The dancing figures, now decoded as a sinister tool of coercion, lay silent on the table, their mystery unraveled but their implications still heavy in the air. Holmes, ever the master of the moment, paced slowly before Slaney, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Mr. Slaney," he began, his voice calm but edged with steel, "your cipher has been broken, your movements tracked, and your purpose exposed. You have pursued Mrs. Cubitt with a persistence that speaks of obsession, and your dancing figures, ingenious though they were, have led us directly to you. Now you will speak plainly. What drove you across an ocean to torment a woman who fled your grasp?" Slaney's lips curled in a sneer, his American accent sharp and unyielding. "You think you've got me all figured, don't you, Englishman? Elsie was mine, promised to me in Chicago, heart and soul. She ran when she got scared, but you don't just walk away from Abe Slaney. I came to bring her back, and I'd have done it too, if you hadn't stuck your nose in." Cubitt, standing by the fireplace, bristled, his hands clenched into fists. "You'll not speak of my wife that way," he growled. "She's free of you, and I'll see you hang for what you've done." Holmes raised a hand, his gaze never leaving Slaney. "Peace, Mr. Cubitt. Let us hear the man out. His words may yet shed light on this affair." Turning back to Slaney, he continued, "You are a man of some repute in Chicago. I presume a leader among those who use these dancing figures as a criminal code. Tell me of your associates, and the nature of the hold you claim over Mrs. Cubitt." Slaney leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "You're a clever one, I'll give you that. Yeah, I ran with a crew in Chicago, tough boys, the kind who don't take kindly to betrayal. The dancing men we called M, a code we cooked up to keep our plans secret. Robberies, mostly, some blackmail when the mood struck. Elsie was my girl, knew the code better than most. She was in deep thought, she loved the thrill, till she turned tail and ran. I spent 3 years, growing years, tracking her, and I wasn't about to let her slip away." I felt a chill at his words, the casual cruelty in his tone confirming Elsie's fear. Her past, it seemed, was not merely a personal entanglement, but a connection to a criminal underworld, one that had followed her across the Atlantic with relentless intent. Holmes's expression remained impassive, though his eyes gleamed with interest. "And the nature of your pursuit," he pressed. "Was it love, as you claim, or something darker, revenge, perhaps, for her rejection?" Slaney's jaw tightened, his voice low and bitter. "Call it what you want. She made a fool of me, running off to this backwater with a farmer. I wanted her back, wanted her to see she couldn't just erase me. The messages were to remind her who she was, who she belonged to. I'd have had her, one way or another." Cubitt took a step forward, his face flushed with rage, but Holmes's sharp glance held him in check. "Your methods betray your intent," Holmes said coolly. "The dancing figures were a tool of terror, designed to break her spirit, but you underestimated her strength and ours. Who aided you in Norfolk? You could not have navigated these marshes alone." Slaney's smirk faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "I work alone," he said, but his eyes darted to the side. A telltale sign of deception. Holmes leaned closer, his voice cutting like a blade. "Do not lie to me, Slaney. Your knowledge of the terrain, the ease with which you evaded pursuit, these suggest a local accomplice, or at least a guide. Name them, or the consequences will be severe." Slaney hesitated, then shrugged, his defiance returning. A tramp in the village, called himself Barlow, knew the marshes like his own hand. I paid him to show me the paths, that's all. He's got no part in this. Holmes nodded, filing the name away. "And your plans for Mrs. Cubitt? Had she answered your summons, what then?" Slaney's eyes darkened, a cruel edge to his voice. "She'd have come with me, or I'd have made sure. Her new life fell apart. Her husband's a simple man, wouldn't take much to ruin him. A word here, a rumor there. Chicago taught me how to break a man without lifting a finger. Cubit's breath hissed through his teeth, but Holmes remained unmoved, his mind already turning to the next step. You have said enough, Slaney. Your crimes are clear trespass, coercion, and intent to harm. The Norfolk Constabulary will deal with you, and I have no doubt Chicago will have its own claims when your name reaches their authorities. Holmes turned to Cubit, his tone softening. Your wife is safe, Mr. Cubit, but this affair is not yet closed. I must confirm Slaney's story and ensure no further threats linger. Watson, we shall return to the village to inquire after this Barlow. Mr. Cubit, remain with your wife. She will need your presence now more than ever. We left Slaney in the custody of the constable, who had arrived with a clatter of hooves and a stern demeanor, and made our way to the village in. The innkeeper, a wiry man with a cautious air, confirmed Barlow's existence, a vagrant known for his knowledge of the marshes, often seen loitering near the station. He's a sly one, the innkeeper said, but harmless, far as I know. Took a few shillings from a stranger last week. Tall fellow with an American twang. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Where is Barlow now? Gone, sir, the innkeeper replied. Left the village yesterday. Said he had business in Yarmouth. Didn't say what. Holmes thanked the man and led me back to the dog cart, his mind clearly racing. Barlow is a minor thread, he said as we drove back to the manor, but Slaney's connection to Chicago is the heart of this. I shall cable my contact at the American Embassy for details on his criminal record. If he led a gang, as he claims, there may be others who know of Elsie's flight. We must ensure no further shadows follow her. Back at the manor, we found Elsie in the drawing room, her face pale but composed, Cubit at her side. She rose as we entered, her eyes searching Holmes's face. Is it over, Mr. Holmes? She asked, her voice steady despite the strain. For now, madame, Holmes replied. Slaney is in custody, his cipher broken. But your past is a thread that may yet unravel further. I must know whether there are others in his gang who might pursue you. Elsie shook her head, her voice soft but firm. Abe was the leader, the only one who cared enough to follow. The others were loyal to him, not to me. I was a tool to them, nothing more. When I left, I cut all ties. Holmes nodded, satisfied for the moment. Then we shall focus on fate, Watson. We return to London tomorrow. I shall pursue inquiries into Slaney's network, but I believe the immediate danger is past. As we prepared to retire, the weight of the American connection lingered, a reminder of a world far removed from Norfolk's quiet fields, where codes and shadows held sway. Holmes, ever vigilant, seemed already to anticipate the next challenge, his mind a beacon against the darkness of secrets yet untold. Chapter 8. The Trapther air in Ridingthorpe Manor was thick with the weight of anticipation as the day waned. The Norfolk sky bruised with clouds that promised rain. Within the library, where the embers of the fire cast a fitful glow, Sherlock Holmes stood with a quiet intensity, his lean figure silhouetted against the window as he surveyed the grounds. The capture of Abe Slaney the previous night had been a triumph, yet Holmes's restless mind refused to rest on laurels. The dancing figures, now fully decoded, had revealed a sinister intent, but the possibility of accomplices or lingering threats kept him vigilant. I, John Watson, stood ready, my revolver cleaned and loaded, while Hilton Cubit paced the room, his honest face a mask of resolve tempered by exhaustion. Holmes turned from the window, his sharp eyes glinting with purpose. "Mr. Cubitt," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "Slaney's confession confirms his obsession, but his mention of this Barlow, the marsh guide, suggests a loose thread. I suspect Slaney acted alone in his pursuit, but we must ensure no others lurk in his shadow. Tonight, we shall set a trap not for Slaney, who is secure with the constable, but for any Confederate who might seek to continue his work." Cubitt stopped pacing, his brow furrowed. "A trap, but Slaney's caught. Mr. Holmes, do you truly believe another would dare show himself?" Holmes's lips curved in a faint smile. "Men like Slaney rarely operate in true isolation, Mr. Cubitt. His gang in Chicago, as Mrs. Cubitt described, used the dancing figures as their code. If another knows of Elsie's whereabouts, they may attempt contact, especially if Slaney promised them reward. We shall use the cipher against them, luring any accomplice into the open." I felt a stir of unease. "How do you propose to do this, Holmes?" "The cipher is known only to Slaney and Mrs. Cubitt, and she is hardly in a state to assist." Holmes crossed to the table, where his charts of the dancing figures lay spread. "The cipher is mine now, Watson," he said, tapping the papers. "With the alphabet fully decoded, I can craft a message as convincingly as Slaney himself. We shall place a new sequence on the sundial, one that mimics his style of summons, brief and urgent. If another watches, they will come, expecting Slaney's hand." Cubitt's eyes widened. "You'll draw them here, to the manor. Is that not dangerous, with Elsie so shaken?" "Danger is already upon us," Holmes replied, his tone resolute. "The only way to end it is to face it. The message will read, 'Come now,' a command no Confederate could ignore. We shall watch the sundial, hidden but ready, and seize whoever appears." The plan was bold, even for Holmes, but his confidence was infectious. Cubitt, though hesitant, agreed, his trust in Holmes outweighing his fear for his wife. "What must I do?" he asked. "Remain with Mrs. Cubitt," Holmes instructed. "Keep her calm and indoors. Watson and I will handle the vigil. If our trap succeeds, we shall have answers by dawn." As evening fell, Holmes and I prepared the bait. Under the cover of dusk, he chalked a new sequence of dancing figures on the sundial, their forms precise in their mimicry of Slaney's hand. The message, "Come now," was simple yet compelling, designed to draw out any lurking accomplice. We then took our positions, Holmes concealed in the yew hedge near the sundial, his dark cloak blending with the shadows, while I crouched behind the garden wall, my revolver at the ready. The night was still, the air heavy with the threat of rain, and the manor loomed behind us, its windows dark save for a single light in Elsie's room. The hours dragged, the silence broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a fox. My limbs grew stiff, but I dared not move, my eyes fixed on the sundial's pale outline. Holmes, I knew, was as alert as ever, his senses honed to the slightest disturbance. I marveled at his patience, his ability to wait like a hunter for his prey, and I drew strength from his unseen presence. It was past 1 o'clock when a faint sound reached my ears, a soft crunch of gravel, deliberate and cautious. I peered over the wall, my heart quickening, and saw a figure emerge from the orchard, moving with a stealth that spoke of practiced care. He was shorter than Slaney, stocky, with a slouch hat pulled low over his face. In his hand, he carried a small lantern, its light shuttered to a mere glow, and he approached the sundial with a wariness that confirmed his suspicion. Holmes's whistle, low and sharp, cut through the night, and I sprang from my hiding place, my revolver trained. "Stand where you are," I called, my voice echoing across the garden. The man froze, his lantern dropping to the grass, and Holmes was upon him in an instant, his grip unyielding as he seized the stranger's arms. "Who are you?" Holmes demanded, his tone icy. "Speak, or you'll answer to the law." The man struggled briefly, then sagged, his face revealed in the dim light, weathered countenance, with a scar running across one cheek. "Barlow," he muttered, his voice rough with a Norfolk accent. "Just a guide, sir, I swear. Slaney paid me to show him the marshes, nothing more." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "And this?" He gestured to the sundial, where the fresh chalk marks gleamed. "You came to read Slaney's message. What is your part in this?" Barlow's gaze darted nervously. "I didn't know his game, sir. He gave me a shilling to watch for these drawings, said to come tonight if I saw M. I'm no criminal, just a man macking a living." Holmes searched him, finding a crumpled note with a single dancing figure, likely a signal from Slaney. "You've been paid to aid a felon," he said, "but your ignorance may spare you. Tell us all you know of Slaney's movements, and do not lie." Barlow, cowed by Holmes's intensity, spilled his tale. He had met Slaney a week prior, hired to guide him through the marshes and keep watch for the manor's routines. Slaney had spoken little of his purpose, only that he sought a woman who owed him. Barlow swore he knew nothing of the ciphers, meaning only that Slaney valued it highly. Holmes nodded, his expression grim. "You will come with us to the constable, Barlow. Your testimony will seal Slaney's fate." We marched Barlow to the manor, where Cubitt met us, his relief palpable. "Is this the last of them, Mr. Holmes?" he asked. "I believe so," Holmes replied. "Slaney's network appears small, and Barlow is no mastermind. But I shall confer with inquiries in London. For now, your wife is safe." As we handed Barlow to the authorities, the first drops of rain began to fall, washing the chalk from the sundial. The trap had sprung, and though it had caught a minor player, it confirmed Holmes's foresight. The dancing figures, once a torment, were now a tool turned against their maker, and Riding Thorpe Manor stood a little lighter under the breaking dawn. Chapter 9. The Confession. The rain that had begun as a drizzle now fell in earnest, cloaking Riding Thorpe Manor in a curtain of silver that seemed to wash away the lingering dread of the past days. Within the manor's library, where the fire had been stoked to a comforting blaze, a heavy silence settled, broken only by the patter of rain against the windows and the occasional crackle of burning logs. Sherlock Holmes stood by the mantel, his lean figure casting a long shadow across the room. His sharp eyes fixed on the papers before him, Hilton Cubitt's sketches of the dancing figures, now fully decoded, and notes from our interrogation of Abe Slaney and his unwitting accomplice, Barlow. I, John Watson, sat near the hearth, my notebook open, ready to record the next chapter of this strange affair, while Cubitt stood by the door, his broad frame tense with the weight of his wife's ordeal. Elsie Cubitt, pale but composed, entered the room, her auburn hair catching the firelight, her eyes carrying a resolve that had been absent in our earlier encounters. The capture of Slaney and the unmasking of Barlow had lifted a veil of fear, yet the shadow of her past lingered, a burden she could no longer evade. Holmes, sensing the moment's gravity, gestured for her to sit. His demeanor, one of quiet authority, tempered with an uncharacteristic gentleness. Mrs. Cubitt, he began, his voice low and steady, the danger is past. Abe Slaney is in custody. His cipher broken, and his guide, Barlow, has revealed his minor role. But the truth of this matter lies with you. Your silence has protected you thus far, but it has also prolonged your suffering. Will you now share the full story of your connection to Slaney and the dancing figures? It is the final key to ensuring your safety. Elsie's hands clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on the fire as if drawing strength from its warmth. Cubitt moved to her side, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, a silent promise of support. She drew a deep breath, her voice soft but clear. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I owe you more than I can repay. You have saved me from a terror I thought would never end. I will tell you everything, though it shames me to revisit that time. Holmes nodded, his expression impassive but attentive. Speak freely, madam. The past cannot harm you now. Elsie began, her words measured, as though each were a stone lifted from a buried vault. I was born in Chicago, the daughter of a merchant, who dealt in grain and cattle. My father was a good man, but his business brought him into contact with rough men who thrived in the shadows of the city's wealth. Among them was Abe Slaney, a man of charm and ambition, who came to our home often in my youth. He was older, confident, with a smile that could sway a crowd, and I was young, barely 20, when he began to court me. I thought him dashing, a man of the world, and I fell in love with the image he presented. She paused, her eyes distant, and Cubitt's hand tightened on her shoulder, a gesture of unwavering loyalty. Go on, my dear, he murmured. You are safe here. Abe taught with me the dancing figures, Elsie continued, a code he devised with his associates, a secret language for their dealings. At first, I thought it'd be a game, a private jest between us. He was part of a gang who robbed banks, extorted merchants, and lived by their wits. I didn't see the truth at first, so caught was I in his charm. But then I witnessed his cruelty, a man beaten for a debt, a shop burned to send a message. I saw the blood on his hands, and I knew I could not stay. When he proposed, I refused him, and he grew wild, swearing I'd never be free of him. I fled Chicago with what little I had, boarding a ship to England, hoping the ocean would be barrier enough. Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. I settled in London, taking work as a governess, and there I met Hilton. His kindness, his honesty, they were a world apart from Abe's darkness. We married, and I thought my past buried. But a year ago, I heard whispers of an American asking questions in the village. And then the dancing figures began on the garden wall, the windowsill, a note under the door. I knew it was Abe, come to claim me, and I was terrified he'd destroy the life I'd built. I couldn't tell Hilton, for fear he'd think me tainted, or worse, that he'd confront Abe and be hurt. Cubitt's face softened, his voice thick, with emotion. Elsie, you could never be tainted in my eyes. I'd have faced him for you, no matter the cost. Holmes, who had listened in silence, leaned forward, his gaze piercing. Mrs. Cubitt, your courage in speaking is commendable. But I must ask, did Slaney have allies who might continue his pursuit? His gang, as you described, relied on the dancing figures. Could another know of your flight to England? Elsie shook her head, her expression firm. Abe was their leader, the only one who cared enough to follow. The others were loyal to his money, not his heart. The dancing figures were his creation, shared only with a few, and I was the only one who left. If others knew, they'd have no reason to chase, Me my worth was to Abe alone. Holmes nodded, his mind sifting her words for truth. And Barlow, the marsh guide, did you ever encounter him in Slaney's company? No, she replied. Abe spoke of using locals for his schemes, men who'd take coin without questions. Barlow must have been one such man, but I never saw him. Holmes turned to Cubitt. Your wife's account aligns with Slaney's confession and Barlow's testimony. The threat, I believe, is contained, but I shall verify this in London. Slaney will face charges here for coercion and trespass, and I shall cable the American authorities to ensure his Chicago crimes are addressed. Cubitt's shoulders relaxed, a weight visibly lifting. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Elsie, my love, we'll put this behind us. You're free now. Elsie's eyes filled with tears, but they were of relief, not fear. I never thought I'd escape him, she said. Your help, Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson, it's given me back my life. Holmes's expression softened, a rare glimpse of warmth in his austere demeanor. The credit belongs to your husband's faith and your own resilience, Mrs. Cubitt. The dancing figures are silent now, their message spent. As we prepared to depart for London, the rain eased, leaving the manor bathed in a tentative light. The confession had laid bare the roots of Elsie's fear, a tale of love twisted into obsession and a past that had crossed an ocean to haunt. Her Holmes, ever forward-looking, was already planning his inquiries into Slaney's Chicago connections, determined to ensure no further shadows emerged. For my part, I felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered by the knowledge that some wounds, though healed, leave scars that linger. Chapter 10. The Resolution. The rain had ceased by the time Sherlock Holmes and I prepared to depart, riding Thorpe Manor, leaving behind a Norfolk landscape washed clean by the storm, its fields glistening under a tentative sun. The manor itself, with its sturdy red brick and quiet dignity, seemed to exhale a sigh of relief, as though the capture of Abe Slaney and the unmasking of his cipher had lifted a palpable weight from its walls. Within the library, where the fire still smouldered, Hilton Cubitt stood beside his wife, Elsie, their hands clasped in a gesture of renewed unity. Her face, though pale, bore a fragile resolve, the shadow of her Chicago past beginning to recede under the light of truth. I, John Watson, stood ready with my notebook, sensing that this final chapter would tie together the threads of a case as intricate as it was perilous. Holmes, his lean figure cloaked in his traveling ulster, surveyed the room with a quiet satisfaction, his sharp eyes lingering on the couple before us. The dancing figures, once a cryptic menace scrawled across the manor's grounds, lay decoded on the table, their secrets laid bare. Slaney was in the hands of the Norfolk Constabulary, his accomplice Barlow detained for questioning, and the cipher's chilling messages, "Come. Tonight or never, last chance," were now mere relics of a failed campaign. Yet, Holmes's mind, ever vigilant, sought to ensure no loose ends remained. "Mr. Cubitt, Mrs. Cubitt," Holmes began, his voice calm but authoritative, "the immediate danger is past. Slaney's arrest and Barlow's confession have severed the chain of threats that plagued your home. The dancing figures, a code born in the shadows of Chicago's underworld, have been silenced. But I must be certain, Mrs. Cubitt, is there any detail you withheld? Any ally of Slaney's who might yet seek you out?" Elsie met his gaze, her orb, A1:B to 5 urn hair, catching the morning light, her voice steady despite the strain of recent days. "I have told you all, Mr. Holmes. Abe was the heart of his gang, the only one with cause to pursue me. The others cared for profit, not for me. The dancing figures were his creation, shared with a few, but none had his obsession. I believe you have ended it. Holmes nodded, his expression one of measured approval. Your candor has been our greatest ally, madam. Slaney's motives, love twisted into vengeance, drove him to cross an ocean, but his arrogance betrayed him. The cipher, though clever, was too personal, too tied to you. It led us to him as surely as a footprint in the mud. Cubit, his broad frame softened by relief, stepped forward. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I cannot repay what you've done. Elsie is safe, and our home is ours again. But what of Slaney? Will he face justice? Holmes's lips curved in a faint smile. He will, Mr. Cubit. The Norfolk charges trespass, coercion, and attempted intimidation are sufficient to hold him. I have cabled the American embassy, and my inquiries confirm Slaney's notoriety in Chicago. He is wanted for robbery and extortion, crimes for which he fled to England. The authorities there will likely seek his extradition. As for Barlow, his role was minor, a hired guide, not a conspirator. He will face lesser charges, but his testimony strengthens the case against Slaney. I felt a surge of satisfaction, tempered by the memory of Elsie's haunted eyes and the chilling messages that had tormented her, and the dancing figures. I asked, will you keep them, Holmes, for your records? Holmes glanced at the sketches, his fingers brushing the paper. They are a curiosity, Watson, a rare example of a private cipher turned to malice. I shall file them in my index alongside other relics of human folly. They may yet serve in future inquiries, though I hope their like never crosses our path again. Elsie rose, her hands clasped tightly, her voice soft but fervent. Mr. Holmes, you've given me back my peace. I thought my past would destroy all I've built, but you've shown me it can be faced. Hilton and I will rebuild, and I'll carry no more secrets. Cubit drew her close, his honest face alight with devotion. We'll face anything together, Elsie. No shadow will touch us again. Holmes's gaze softened, a rare glimpse of warmth in his austere demeanor. You have each other's strength, and that is no small thing. Guard it well, and let the dancing figures fade into memory. We took our leave shortly after, the dog-cart rattling back to Norwich Station under a clearing sky. Holmes was silent. For much of the journey, his mind already turning to other matters, though I caught him glancing at the notebook where the cipher's secrets were recorded. The train to London carried us through fields now bright with sunlight, a stark contrast to the tension of our Norfolk vigil. I settled into our compartment, my thoughts lingering on the Cubits. Their love tested but unbroken. Back at 2-1 Baker Street, Holmes lit his pipe and sank into his armchair. The familiar clutter of our rooms, a comforting return to routine. A singular casi, Watson, he mused, the smoke curling about his head. The dancing figures were a puzzle, but the true mystery was human, the pull of a past that refused to release its hold. Slaney's obsession, Elsie's fear, Cubit's loyalty, they are the threads that wove this drama. I nodded, my pen poised over my notebook. It's a tale worth recording, Holmes. A cipher born in crime, a woman's flight across an ocean, and a husband's steadfast heart. It has all the makings of one of your finest adventures. Holmes's eyes gleamed with a flicker of amusement. Write it if you must, Watson, but spare me the romance. The cipher was the key, and reason the lock. That is enough for me. As the fire crackled, and the London evening settled around us, I began to set down the tale, the dancing figures now a distant echo. their menace dispelled by the light of Holmes's relentless logic. The resolution was complete, but the story of Riding Thorpe Manor would linger, a testament to the power of truth to banish even the darkest shadows. The end.